What if everything that we assume about education is wrong? I think a lot of us kind of are thinking that or sensing that education is changing. There are a lot of, there's like magazines called Rethinking Education. There are a lot of pieces of media that seem to speak to this general ethos, zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it, in the air right now. At least in the United States. I don't know about other countries. I don't know about other even westernized countries. But people seem to be on to this. People can smell it. People can smell that there's something off about how we've been thinking about education for the last X amount of years. Enter your opinion here. I'm going to share a story of a child who struggled in school and then thrived in an alternative setting. And I'm going to share that story, and that story is about me. And I'm now an educator in alternative education. And so I see this happening on loop for other people, for other young people, for other young adults, etc. The reason that I want to share this story is because the point of this video is to define learning, education, information, knowledge, and more specifically, self-directed education, which is an alternative form of education. So we're going to go through these terms, okay? Education, alternative education, self-directed education, learning, information, and knowledge. We're going to go through these 7 terms and define them according to a conversation I had with 4 other alternative educators in a group, in a video call group. It was an hour long. It was a great conversation. And everybody shared their take, their definition of self-directed education and those kind of related terms. So here's the story of the kid that didn't do well in conventional and then thrived in alternative later on in life. It's me. I'm the person. So I dropped out of high school. This was the big inflection point in my life. Was dropping out of high school, and at the time it felt very scary. It felt like a failure. It was embarrassing. I was uncertain about it, but it ended up being the best choice that I ever made to this day, because it showed me my own power. It opened my eyes to the fact that I have an impact, that I can have an impact on my own life, that I can make change in the world and in myself. And honestly, I don't think I really understood how to do that before that moment, because I'd never practiced it. Because the thing about conventional school is the last thing it's going to do is really allow you to choose for yourself. You may get options within an assignment. You may get options between your classes, but most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, conventional school is I tell you what to do. And it happens on even playtime is sometimes structured. What does that even mean, y'all? Play is, I'm gonna make up the rules as I go, or we're gonna agree on the rules together. Choosing for myself, I went from helpless to empowered. And this video is going to be a deep dive into the many names and definitions of self-directed education and those related terms. It is difficult to land on, to agree on, to have a consensus about. And conventional school is similar in that way, which it can be expressed. There are good schools, there are bad schools, there are this schools, there are that, there's Montessori, there's all sorts of different types of school, right? Even just down to the public school of one particular region. If there's more than one public school, they're going to do things in more than one way. And there may be very large differences between those schools. And so, people choose them for different reasons. They may have different specialties, different culture for their teachers, differences. So let's talk about those differences and those definitions. So the words are learning, education, alternative education, self-directed education, information, and knowledge. These are the words. In talking with these 4 other educators, what did we come up with? So just a quick background on who am I. I'll introduce myself. Of the 5 people in the room, I'll introduce myself first. I've been an alternative educator since 2010 when I got my GED. So at the same time that I was studying for it, I was teaching it, I was tutoring it as a volunteer at a Brooklyn nonprofit. And then over time, as I was going to City College, which I also dropped out of because it also was too conventional for me, I found out that alternative education had more legs. It had more varieties. It had different flavors. And I became obsessed with this rabbit hole. And I found so much. I found free democratic schools through Brooklyn Free School, through an NPR episode where they interviewed Brooklyn Free School people. I found the Sudbury model. I visited Hudson Valley Sudbury School. I found Agile Learning Centers. I even trained with them at one point. I found my alma mater, Goddard College. I found them through the Alternative Education Revolution organization, ARROW. And now I've done a lot of work with the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, ASDE. So I found all of these outlets for alternative education. And while they're similar, they're not the same. So let's get into different perspectives about what are these terms. Why am I talking about this, and why do you care? I'm talking about this because I'm the founder of Off the Beaten Path Learning, and we provide one-on-one self-directed education. We also provide a group, kind of accountability group for adults called the Choice Collective. And for you may be watching this as a parent or an educator or a family member or a guardian, because I find that when people are looking for education, they're very often looking for their children's education. And that kind of grinds my gears a little bit because when you're past 18, or when you're past 25, or when you're past 30, or when learning is lifelong, full stop, period. Learning is lifelong, or at least it really, really can be, and it really, really should be. You don't want your brain to atrophy. You don't want it to just stop. You want your quality of life to be as interesting and full as it can be. So you may be watching this as an educator that's curious about how other educators think. You may be watching this as a conventional school educator that is interested in alternative education. Maybe you're burned out. Maybe you're just curious. Or you may be a parent or a guardian and you're curious to know about the different kinds, the different models of education. So what are the alternatives? And how do we define them? With we being the alternative educators in this video call that I was in. Before we begin, I want you to know that it's perfectly okay and to be expected, natural, to need support with your young people's education. And I'm going to plug Off the Beaten Path here because the one-on-one personalized support, it gets rid of the distraction. It gets rid of the noise. It allows the learner to really connect with who they truly are, what they're truly interested in, what they're truly good at, and how to navigate what they're not so good at. And it gives them this freedom, space, time, room, support, attention. And if you want to learn more, there's a link in the description, and the initial call is free of charge. So definitely contact me to learn more. So we're in this Discord server. It's the ASDE Facilitator Community. Super cool space. You're more than welcome to join it. It's free. It's on Discord. It's a hoot and a holler and the best. We meet every Sunday and Monday, and it's great. And this is directed at professionals in the field of self-directed education. So there's 5 of us. It's Allison's in the room, Ken is in the room, Frank, Arturo, who I recently met, super cool guy, and me, Dominique. So Allison kind of is welcoming us in. I show up, I'm 3 minutes late, 5 minutes late. Allison is welcoming us in already, and you can tell she's the person who's leading the room. I mean, I know this because I am a colleague, I guess, of Allison's, and we kind of hold this space together alongside Andrea of Embark Center. So, Allison of Raritan Learning Cooperative in, I think, Jersey, and Andrea of Embark in Virginia, and me of Off the Beaten Path. We are the kind of, the 3, I would say, core co-creators, and everyone in the group is considered a co-creator if they want to be, but we're the main ones. And my point is just you can tell that Allison is leading the space and moderating and doing a great job. So we're in this space. It's the 5 of us, pretty intimate conversation. Ironically, it's the biggest that this group gets. It's a super small group. And Allison says, let's all introduce ourselves. And if anyone has a topic that they want to discuss, throw it in. So I'm the last one, I think, to introduce myself, and the topic that I decide to throw in is how do you explain self-directed education to people? Like, how do you guys, you other SDE facilitators, explain it? And Allison's kind of perspective on this was, how do you talk about the thing that nobody knows what you're talking about to people who don't know what you're talking about? And I was like, yeah, exactly, exactly that is the problem. So we share. And what we ended up sharing was really interesting. So Ken talked about how conventional schooling is very future oriented. It's very, you're getting these grades so that in X amount of time you can ... It's very results oriented, whereas SDE is more in the present moment. It's not really in the past, although it accumulates from the past, and it's not really in the future. It's mostly in the present moment. And I thought that was interesting. I'd never thought about that before. I think Frank might have been the first person to share, and his really stuck with me too. Like, he said self-directed education. Oh, actually no, it was Arturo. Arturo was the first person to share. But Frank's take on it was that, and this is Frank of Dive Pod in Canada. He does computer science with 16-year-olds to 24-year-olds. Really cool stuff. I'll put links in the description if the educators agree to it. So it's with their consent. I'll put links to their these various alternative education options in the description, and you can go through those. Frank shared that self-directed education is about accountability. It's about you accounting for your own decisions, your own outcomes, your own. Like, you are the leader of yourself. You are taking ownership over your education. And I often use that word ownership as well, that the only piece of eligibility for a learner to go off the beaten path, as it were, is that they crave more ownership over their education. That's it. That's the only thing. Arturo's take on self-directed education was interesting and more broad. So this is where the other definitions come into play. He broke down learning as a process, that it's not an outcome, it's a process. And it's a process of kind of digesting. He alluded to nutrition. It's a process of digesting information and knowledge so that you can integrate it into your bigger body of knowledge. I thought a process was a cool way to think of it, and it separates from education, which in my perspective, education is a result. It's what you put out into the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be a production, right? You don't have to produce for it to be a piece of education, but I think that the E makes me think of like putting it out. The etymology of the word education comes from the Latin word to lead out, right? So there's this like pulling of learning, the processing of information and knowledge out into the world. So that's how I think of education. Okay, so we talked about Ken with present, Arturo with the learning and the education, Frank with accountability. Allison spoke about how education is a cumulative thing. So it's over time you build connections in your mind, and as those connections grow stronger, so do your skills and your opportunities. And so for her, I think it was really about building connections in your brain. And I think that's kind of like a neuroscientific approach to seeing what is learning and how does it formulate. I think for me in particular, I would say self-directed education is about choice. And so, because going back to my story about dropping out of high school, what really did it for me was choosing for myself. Like, that was the thing that drew the fork in the road. And I went from helpless to empowered, to knowing that I could do something about something. Like, for mental health purposes, that is such a game changer. For general ability and well-being and success, such a game changer. So I'm curious as to what if you could change one thing overnight about education generally, what would it be, right? Not about the systems of education in your country, in your region, what would it be? And if this conversation really spoke to you, really got your ears perked up, then first of all, you're a nerd, you're an education nerd. And let's talk more. Let's go deeper into talking about alternative ways to learn. Feel free to schedule a time to speak about it. The initial call is free because, the future of education isn't coming one day. It's here. And so how do we deal with that? How do we empower ourselves to meet the future where it's at? Thanks for watching.